The moment a chosen one stops apologizing for their power, every hidden enemy starts choking on their own intentions. My dear chosen ones, let's start there, because you've been walking through life like a quiet storm, and trust me, the ones who tried to break you felt the thunder long before you ever raised your voice. You've moved with a confidence that made your enemies nervous, not because you were loud, but because you were certain. And certainty, when coming from someone who isn't supposed to make it, hits harder than any punch they could ever throw. Let's pull the curtain back. There's a reason you kept walking through situations that should have crushed you. A reason you rose from battles that were engineered to bury you. People looked at your calmness, your silence, your unbothered presence and thought you were naive. But chosen ones, you weren't naive. You were tuned in. You were aligned with something bigger than fear, bigger than doubt, bigger than the noise around you. Every step you took wasn't a guess. It was a move that came from a deeper intelligence inside you. A knowing that told you, this path may look chaotic now, but trust, you're built for this. They thought you were just lucky, cute. But luck doesn't explain how you walked through fire and came out smelling like perfume. Luck doesn't explain how people twice as prepared, twice as supported, still couldn't outshine you on your worst day. And luck definitely doesn't explain why every time they counted you out, the situation twisted itself into your favor, like the universe was determined to embarrass your opposition. No, chosen ones, this wasn't luck. This was alignment. This was the unmistakable signature of someone backed by unseen momentum. When someone is chosen, even the obstacles are forced to cooperate. That's why your enemies were confused. They threw shade, and somehow you sprouted. They built traps, and you turned them into stepping stones. They whispered about you behind closed doors, hoping you'd collapse under the weight of their projections. Instead, you got quieter, sharper, stronger. And that quiet strength scared them more than anything else, because nothing terrifies an enemy like someone who refuses to break on schedule. And I know you've wondered at times, why me? Why did I have to go through so much? Why did people try so hard to dim me? Why did it feel like I was fighting battles no one else could see? Let me answer you, chosen one, because you were never ordinary. Your journey wasn't built to be easy, it was built to be evidence. Evidence that resilience is a language, evidence that pressure creates precision, evidence that when a chosen one moves with conviction, even storms have to step aside. You didn't move like someone waiting for a green light. You moved like someone who felt the shift before anyone else could see it. You sensed when a room was off. You felt when someone's energy wasn't clean. You knew when an opportunity wasn't for you, even when the world said you'd be crazy to walk away. That wasn't paranoia. That wasn't stubbornness. That was your inner compass, calibrated on a frequency most people can't pick up. And because they couldn't hear what you heard, they mistook your brave moves for recklessness. They mistook your intuition for attitude. They mistook your silence for weakness. Meanwhile, you were playing chess while they were struggling with checkers. Chosen ones, this video isn't for the faint-hearted. This is for the ones who've been underestimated, misread, mislabeled, but never stopped moving. The ones who didn't need applause to stay committed or permission to rise. The ones who knew, deep down, that the force backing them wasn't just watching, it was pushing them forward, clearing the way, amplifying their steps. So grab your water, your journal, your intentions, whatever anchors you, and settle in. Because we're about to unpack why you moved the way you did, why your enemies reacted the way they did, and why your path was never random. Chosen ones, let's get into it. Chosen ones, before we go any further, let me speak directly to the ones who feel these words vibrating in their bones. Your presence here isn't random. You showed up because something in you recognizes truth when it calls your name. If this message is hitting you in places you don't talk about, stay with me. Tap that like button, hit subscribe, and drop the number 44 in the comments so I know you're one of the ones who move with that unseen force backing every step you take. And if you feel called to support this work, a super thanks goes a long way in keeping this message alive for those who need it most. Now take a breath, because we're about to break this down piece by piece. And believe me, if you are truly a chosen one, you're about to recognize signs you've carried your whole life. These aren't coincidences. These aren't quirks. These are markers of someone who has always moved with support that ordinary eyes can't detect. And now, let's step into it together. Number 1. You weren't following instincts. You were responding to a higher-level internal guidance system. You weren't following instincts. You were moving like someone wired to sense what others can't even name. The moment a chosen one listens to their inner signal, every enemy, depending on your confusion, loses their power in an instant. My dear chosen ones, let's get this straight from the start. You didn't move the way you moved because you were guessing. You moved that way because something inside you was calibrated to frequencies most people will never tune into. And yes, your enemies felt that before you even understood it. That's why they called you unpredictable. That's why they said you were impulsive. That's why they whispered, "Why would they do that?" Every time you made a move that didn't fit the script they built for you. They weren't confused by your actions. They were intimidated by the accuracy of them. Chosen ones, you've always had this unexplained knowing, this sudden pull, this internal nudge that made you turn left when everyone else insisted the right path was more logical. They thought you were running on emotions, but you were actually running on an internal navigation system that doesn't operate on logic alone. And let's be honest, you've probably asked yourself more than once, why do I just know things? Why do I move before evidence shows up? Why do I feel the shift before anyone says a word? Because you're not built like everyone else, chosen one. You operate on confirmation that comes from within, long before the outside world catches up. You feel energy before you see outcomes. You read intention before you hear explanations. You sense danger before it arrives and alignment before it fully forms. That's not randomness. That's not luck. That's not impulsiveness. That's internal intelligence. While others need charts, signs, and step-by-step reassurance, you only needed that inner click, the sensation that told you, "Go now." And every time you trusted that inner voice, your enemies flinched. Why? Because people who rely on manipulation hate when someone can't be predicted. People who depend on your hesitation panic when you move with confidence. People who try to box you in crumble when you refuse to stay still long enough to be cornered. You weren't moving blindly. You were moving boldly. Chosen ones, think about all the times you walked away from places that looked perfectly fine on the outside. Jobs that everyone else admired, friendships that looked stable, opportunities that seemed promising. People thought you were sabotaging yourself. But deep down, something in you whispered, "This isn't your path." And even if you didn't understand why at the moment, you listened. And then, months later, sometimes even years, the truth revealed itself, proving that your inner signal was right all along. This is what separates you. You don't wait for validation because your clarity doesn't come from outside approval. You don't need a blueprint because you are the blueprint. And that's exactly why people underestimated you. They weren't equipped to understand a navigation system they themselves weren't wired with. Chosen ones, your ability to move with silent certainty is not an accident. It's not a flaw. It's your power. A power that has carried you out of traps you didn't even know you were avoiding and guided you into opportunities you weren't qualified for on paper but were aligned for in spirit. You weren't being reckless. You were being responsive to your inner truth. And every time you trusted that truth, you proved once again The force backing you wasn't just watching, it was steering you with precision that no enemy could intercept. Chosen ones. Let's go deeper. Number 2. You weren't being reckless. You were making quantum leaps. Your environment couldn't decode. You didn't take risks. You made power moves so bold they looked like madness to the untrained eye. When a chosen one jumps, the ground rearranges itself mid-air just to make sure they land standing. That's why your enemies hate your courage. It exposes their confinement. My dear chosen ones, let's break this open. People love to call you reckless when they can't understand your rhythm. They love to label you impulsive when they're terrified to take even one step outside the boundaries they've built for themselves. They love to act confused by your choices because admitting they could never make them would force them to confront their own fear. But you, chosen one, you've never moved like someone playing it safe. You've moved like someone who felt the shift long before anyone else realized change was already in motion. Your leaps weren't random. They were required. Think about all the times people stared at you like you were out of your mind. Why would you quit that job? Why would you leave that relationship? Why would you start something new when you finally got comfortable? They asked questions because they were trying to make sense of a path that was never built for them. You weren't following logic. You weren't following comfort. You were following alignment, something they can't measure, can't analyze, and definitely can't imitate. Chosen ones, you weren't out here gambling. You were obeying an internal urgency that only you could feel. It didn't give explanations. It didn't hand you blueprints. It didn't wait for permission. It simply whispered, "Move." And unlike the crowd that needs approval, reassurance, and 10 different signs, you moved. Not because you had no fear, but because you had no intention of staying trapped in places that were shrinking you. Your leaps looked wild because you weren't meant to survive within small systems. You were meant to outgrow them. Every time you walked away from a place that looked stable, what people didn't see was how that same place would have drained the life out of you if you had stayed. Every time you took what looked like a risk, what they didn't understand was how staying still would have been the real danger for someone wired like you. You weren't running from comfort, you were running toward expansion. Chosen ones, your enemies hoped your risks would ruin you. Instead, they revealed you. Because here's the truth, things didn't just work out for you. Things aligned around you. Doors didn't open randomly. They opened because you approached them at the exact moment you were meant to. Opportunities didn't fall into your lap. They formed because you stepped into a timeline that matched your courage. People who live in fear will always think your bravery is insanity. They've never taken a leap without a net. They've never followed a feeling so strong it made logic irrelevant. They've never trusted themselves enough to move when the world told them to freeze. That's why your steps confuse them. Your certainty exposes their hesitation, and your movement highlights their paralysis. Chosen ones, you didn't just take risks. You moved in a rhythm the world wasn't ready to witness. You jumped, and instead of falling, you flew. Not because it was easy, not because you were fearless, but because deep down you always knew you were backed. Let's keep going. Number 3, you didn't survive easily. You were stabilized by forces within you. Nobody could see. You made survival look effortless because no one saw the invisible strength carrying you through the fire. Nothing terrifies your enemies more than realizing you survived battles they never even knew you were fighting. My dear chosen ones, let's peel back the curtain on something almost nobody understands about you. The world saw your smile, but it never saw the battlefield behind it. They watched you walk into rooms with calmness, kindness, and composure. But they had no idea how many nights you spent holding yourself together with nothing but sheer will and the faint whisper of strength that refused to leave you. They thought your survival was luck, talent, or emotional toughness. But you and I both know What kept you standing was something deeper, something internal, something unshaken, something unbreakable. Chosen one, you made survival look light because the weight you carried was invisible to everyone except you. They didn't see the nights when your mind felt like a war zone. They didn't hear the battles you fought in silence while everyone else slept peacefully. They couldn't comprehend the days you woke up with zero energy, zero motivation, zero hope, yet still showed up, still pushed through, still refused to crumble. While others broke under pressure, you learned to breathe underwater. While others collapsed at the first sign of struggle, you learned to walk through storms like they were part of your training. You weren't just surviving, you were being upheld by a force within you that even you couldn't explain at times. That's why when people asked, "How do you do it?" you didn't have an answer, you just did. Something in you pulled you forward when everything else was trying to drag you under. Something in you refused to let you quit, even when quitting seemed logical. Something in you kept whispering, "Not yet, keep going." Chosen ones, the truth is harsh but beautiful. Most people couldn't handle one chapter of the life you've lived. If they had to feel even half the emotional earthquakes you endured, they'd have shattered. If they had to walk through even a fraction of the loneliness you carried, they would have folded. But you kept moving. Not because you were unhurt, but because your resilience wasn't built on appearance. It was built on endurance. You didn't broadcast your breakdowns. You didn't make your suffering a show. And because you carried your pain with dignity, people assumed you had none. They mistook your silence for ease and your strength for simplicity. But chosen one, your story is soaked in silent victories they will never understand. And here's the part that hits hardest. You didn't survive just for you. Your survival became a roadmap, a blueprint, proof to others that rising from the ashes isn't a myth. It's a reality for those courageous enough to keep fighting even when no one is watching. What should have broken you became the very material that built you. You didn't just get through hell. You walked out carrying wisdom, fire, and power that can't be taught. And that's why your enemies fear you now. Not because you survived, but because you survived so well that they can't even tell what tried to destroy you. Chosen one, your survival is not just a chapter. It's your legacy. Number 4. Your pain wasn't chaos. It was a precision training sequence, rewiring your inner power. Your pain wasn't misfortune, it was the training ground that turned you into a walking detection system. When a chosen one survives what was meant to break them, the enemy doesn't just lose the battle, they lose the element of surprise forever. My dear chosen ones, let's rip the mask off this illusion once and for all. Your pain was never random. It wasn't a messy streak of bad luck or a tragic run of wrong place, wrong time. No. What you went through was coded, calculated, a sequence designed not to destroy you, but to upgrade you. An initiation that forced your spirit, your intuition, your awareness to rise to levels you never would have reached if life had handed you comfort instead of chaos. Think back for a moment. Every betrayal, that wasn't just someone being disloyal, it was a crash course in reading people's true nature. Every loss, that wasn't the universe punishing you, it was clearing out what couldn't travel with you to your next level. Every moment of isolation, it wasn't rejection, it was recalibration. And every time you questioned your worth, your sanity, your direction, those were the exact moments your inner strength was quietly sharpening its blade. Chosen ones, the pain that almost took you out was the very thing that taught you how to see beneath the surface. After you've been cut by someone you trusted, you don't just learn about them, you learn about yourself. You learn how your energy shifts around certain people. You learn to sense intentions before words even land. You start recognizing patterns, not excuses. That's not paranoia. That's refinement. That's your internal radar coming online. And let's talk about the silence they forced you into. That quiet season where nobody called, nobody checked in, nobody invited you, nobody cared enough to ask how you were holding it together. You thought you were being abandoned. But chosen ones, that silence was your sanctuary. That was the universe muting the world so you could finally hear your own frequency without distortion, without noise, without opinions. That was when your discernment leveled up, when you stopped reacting to external chaos and started recognizing internal truth. Pain taught you how to fight without swinging, how to speak without shouting, how to shift a room without announcing your presence. Pain refined you into someone who no longer guesses, you knows. Someone who no longer confuses charm with character. Someone who doesn't wait for people to show their true colors, because you can feel their intentions the moment they step into your space. You're not too sensitive, you're prepared. You're not too guarded, you're informed. And you're not too intense, you're trained. What almost destroyed you wasn't your downfall, it was your initiation. You weren't being cracked apart, you were being crafted, sculpted, tempered, built for pressure, built for precision, built for a path that demands someone who doesn't fold at the first sign of difficulty. Chosen ones, your pain turned you into something rare, a human lie detector, an emotional strategist, a master observer. You don't just survive environments, you transform them with your presence. You didn't go through hell for nothing. You went through it because your next level required someone who could see in the dark. Your pain didn't break you. It built the version of you your enemies prayed you'd never become. Let's keep going, chosen ones. Number 5. You didn't go silent. You were exiting. Low-frequency battles that weren't worth your energy. They thought you went silent. You were cutting the cord to energy that was never meant to hold you. When a chosen one walks away, it isn't rejection, it's eviction. Every hidden enemy gets thrown out of your energy the moment you choose yourself. My dear chosen ones, this is the part they never understood about you. They swore you were ignoring them, acting brand new, switching up, becoming distant. They tried to paint you as cold, detached, heartless. But let's tell the truth they could never swallow. You weren't ignoring anyone. You were obeying an internal signal that told you loud and clear, disengage now. And when that signal hits a chosen one, resistance is not an option. You didn't disconnect because you were petty. You disconnected because your peace was suffocating in places where chaos was normal. You didn't go quiet because you were angry. You went quiet because your energy was being drained faster than you could replenish it. You weren't ghosting people. You were escaping emotional quicksand disguised as relationships. Chosen ones, you finally saw the pattern. You saw how your presence had become a feeding ground for people who had no intention of growing, only consuming. People who loved you the most when you were unsure of your worth. People who applauded your pain but went silent on your progress. People who clung to you, not because they valued you, but because they needed the light you carried to brighten the shadows they refused to fix. Once you realized that staying wasn't compassion, it was self-destruction. And yes, dear chosen ones, they called you distant. They claimed you switched up. They accused you of thinking you're better than everyone. But they never admitted the real reason they were upset. Your silence cut off their supply. You stopped being their emotional battery. You stopped absorbing what wasn't yours. You stopped allowing the insecure, the manipulative, and the low frequency to graze on your energy unchecked. You weren't in friendships. You were in silent battles. You were in unspoken tug-of-wars where their comfort demanded your shrinking, where your clarity was treated as a threat, where your intuition exposed truths they desperately needed you to ignore, and when your inner compass whispered, "Enough," you listened, even if it made you look like the villain in their story. Because chosen ones, your soul felt the shift before your mind could explain it. The tension, the heaviness, the exhaustion that hit you after certain conversations, the way your energy dipped around specific people. That wasn't oversensitivity. That was your internal warning system flashing red. You didn't reject anyone. You simply recognized who couldn't handle your evolution. Some people wanted access to you without respecting what you carry. They wanted the healed you while still treating you like the broken version you used to be. They wanted your empathy, but not your boundaries. They wanted your presence without giving you peace. But the moment you reclaimed your power, you stopped being their mirror and became their threat. So yes, chosen ones, they said you changed. But the truth is, you finally saw the battle hidden behind the smiles. You realized warfare isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up as love that drains, suffocates, or slowly diminishes your spark. You weren't ignoring anyone. You were protecting your mission, your energy, your elevation. And that choice, that's what makes you unstoppable. Number 6. Your delays weren't setbacks. They were strategic pauses that saved you from misalignment. Your delays weren't roadblocks. They were redirections. Only a chosen one could survive. When a chosen one is forced to slow down, it's not because they're behind, it's because the path ahead is being cleared where enemies can't follow. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about that season of your life where everything felt like it was happening for everyone except you. People around you were leveling up, new jobs, new relationships, new opportunities, and you were stuck in a place that felt like emotional quicksand. You pushed, you hustled, you showed up, you gave everything you had, and still nothing moved. It felt personal, it felt humiliating, it felt like the universe was ignoring your effort. But hear me clearly, you weren't being blocked, you were being buffered. Chosen ones, your delays weren't dead ends. They were reroutes coming from a deeper intelligence that knew something you didn't yet see. While you questioned your worth, the unseen was rearranging your path to make sure you didn't walk straight into the jaws of situations that would have drained you dry. You didn't know that the opportunity you begged for was tied to someone ready to sabotage you. You didn't know that the relationship you mourned was a slow leak that would have emptied everything you were building. You didn't know that the door that wouldn't open was actually a doorway into chaos disguised as success. That's why your stillness felt so intense, because chosen ones don't get delayed for no reason. They get delayed because their path carries weight. Your energy isn't meant for every room. Your presence isn't meant for every stage. Your power isn't meant for environments that would twist it, exploit it, or dilute it. While others rushed into situations they weren't emotionally or spiritually prepared for, you were placed in a holding pattern, a protected airspace, so you didn't collide with things that had the potential to corrupt your expansion. And I know you've wondered, why did it look so easy for them? Why didn't things move for me the way they did for everyone else? Because chosen ones don't get shortcuts. You get precision timing. You don't get rushed breakthroughs. You get strategic elevation. You don't move when you want. You move when the environment is safe enough for your purpose to breathe. Look back, chosen one. Think about how many disasters you avoided simply because something told you, not yet. Think about how many rooms you were kept out of that later collapsed. Think about how many people you wanted access to who later exposed their true intentions. You weren't being denied. You were being protected from walking into your own downfall. And when your moment finally arrived, everything started shifting at once. What was once impossible suddenly became effortless. Paths that were blocked for years opened like automatic doors. Opportunities you once chased began to chase you, and in that moment you realized this was never about delay, it was alignment. Chosen ones, you were never late. You were right on schedule for the kind of life that requires patience, awareness, and strength. Now that your door has opened, you're not stepping in confused. You're stepping in prepared, elevated, and untouchable, because the force backing you wasn't just watching. It was rerouting your entire destiny with precision only a chosen one could understand. Number 7. You weren't invisible. You were intentionally off radar while your strength upgraded. You weren't lost at all. You were the storm the world wasn't ready to see yet. A chosen one isn't overlooked. They're simply kept off the stage until the moment their entrance becomes impossible to ignore. My dear chosen ones, let's clear something up right now. You were never lost, never confused, never wandering without direction the way people assumed. You weren't drifting, you were strategically unseen. And the ones who misread your silence as uncertainty had no idea they were witnessing the preparation of someone who carried far too much power to be thrown into the world half-formed. They looked at you and thought, oh, they're just quiet, invisible, forgettable. But chosen ones, invisibility was your camouflage, not your condition. You weren't overlooked. You were intentionally placed behind the veil, out of sight, out of reach, out of the hands of people who would have mishandled your potential before it had the chance to take shape. You weren't being rejected. You were being protected. And I know you've wondered, why didn't they see me? Why wasn't I invited? Why did opportunities pass me by? But hear me when I say this. You weren't kept out of rooms because you didn't belong there. You were kept out because those rooms weren't built strong enough to handle the force you were carrying. You walking in too early would have cracked their foundation. Chosen ones, your silence was never weakness. It was incubation. Your absence from the spotlight wasn't failure. It was alignment. You weren't meant to rise when others expected you to. You were meant to rise when your emergence would shift the atmosphere. People mistook your calm for confusion, your watching for wandering, your stillness for stagnation. But you were studying, observing, absorbing, becoming. You were gathering wisdom, sharpening your instincts, strengthening your inner framework. While they were racing to be seen, you were preparing to be undeniable. Because here's the truth. Premature exposure would have been sabotage. The wrong eyes on you too early would have led to envy, interference, imitation, and attacks you weren't meant to deal with yet. You carried a vision so heavy, so potent, so ahead of its time, that you had to be shielded while it matured into something unshakable. You weren't the forgotten one, you were the protected one. Chosen ones, you've always been the quiet storm, the force gathering strength behind the scenes, the disruptor disguised as a bystander, the one with ancient insight in a world addicted to noise. And while people assumed you had no direction, you were actually holding a blueprint too powerful to reveal to anyone who didn't deserve access. Your invisibility was sacred, not sad. And now the shift is here. The unveiling is approaching. The world is about to realize that the person they thought was quiet was actually calculating, that the one they labeled insignificant was actually irreplaceable, that the one they assumed was lost was simply being positioned. Chosen ones, you were hidden not because you were small, but because your arrival was meant to be seismic. And when a chosen one finally steps into visibility, they don't enter a room. They transform it. Number 8. You didn't walk away. You triggered a system reset the moment you removed your energy. You didn't just leave the room. You pulled the plug on an entire system built on your energy. When a chosen one walks away, the walls don't just shake. They finally tell the truth about who was really holding them up. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about something most people can't comprehend. Your exit was never just an exit. When you walked away from those toxic places, those draining relationships, those environments that fed on your silence, you weren't simply choosing peace. You were triggering a collapse. You were the stabilizing force, the quiet backbone, the unspoken order keeping chaos from consuming the room. And the moment you stepped out, everything that had been pretending to function finally showed its cracks. People thought you were being dramatic. They said you were too sensitive, too reactive, too unable to handle life. Cute. What they never understood is that chosen ones don't react. Chosen ones respond to internal alerts that signal when a space has reached the end of its access to them. You weren't leaving because you were overwhelmed. You were leaving because your energy could no longer be used as scaffolding for structures that were already collapsing on the inside. Chosen ones, you need to hear this. You didn't just walk away. You deactivated systems that were living off your light. Your presence was the quiet architecture holding dysfunctional rooms together. You didn't speak much, but your energy did the heavy lifting. You didn't try to fix people, yet somehow everything operated smoother when you were near. You didn't announce your boundaries. They were felt, not heard. And because your essence carried balance, people built their illusions of stability on you without ever giving you credit for it. But toxic spaces always make the same mistake. They think the chosen one is replaceable. So when you left, they expected things to stay the same. They thought the show would go on, but your absence exposed everything they worked hard to hide. Suddenly, the masks slipped, the fake harmony broke, the tension that had been simmering under the surface erupted. What they called peace was really the silence you provided simply by existing. And when you were gone, the truth showed up uninvited. Arguments started, ego battles emerged. Manipulators lost their grip because their favorite target wasn't there to absorb the blows. Controllers found their strings useless because you were the one they had been pulling all along. The entire ecosystem malfunctioned because the energy source had walked out the door. Chosen ones, you were never just another piece of the environment. You were the anchor. And when an anchor lifts, the ship doesn't just drift. It gets tested by the waves it pretended not to fear. Your departure wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't avoidance. It wasn't weakness. It was a strategic reset, a necessary unplugging, a silent revolution. You didn't need to make noise because your absence made more noise than your presence ever could. And deep down, they know it. They felt the shift. They felt the vacuum. They felt the collapse of everything that depended on your harmony to hide the dysfunction. You didn't destroy anything. You simply stopped holding together what was never yours to repair. Chosen ones. That's the power of someone who moves like they know the force behind them isn't just watching, it's backing every step, including the ones that walk away. Number 9. They didn't find you weird. Their unresolved shadows reacted to your unfiltered presence. They didn't call you weird because you were strange. They called you weird because your presence exposed what they were hiding. A chosen one doesn't have to speak to shake a room. Sometimes the truth in their energy screams louder than any words ever could. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about that label they loved to throw at you. Weird. They said it casually, as a joke, sometimes as an insult wrapped in fake concern. But chosen one, you and I both know they weren't reacting to your personality. They were reacting to their own shadows. People weren't uncomfortable because you were different. They were uncomfortable because you were clear, and clarity terrifies those who thrive in confusion. You didn't have to do anything dramatic to unsettle them. Just walking into a room with your authentic energy was enough to make their insecurities start pacing back and forth. You carried a presence that didn't ask for attention, but demanded honesty. You didn't try to stand out. You simply existed in a way that stripped away the illusions people loved hiding behind. That kind of presence disrupts the comfort of those who depend on pretense to feel powerful. Chosen one, you've probably noticed this your whole life. People getting defensive around you without knowing why, acting strange, pulling away, or watching you like they're trying to decode something hidden in your face. That wasn't confusion, it was exposure. You weren't attacking them, your authenticity was. Your transparency shined a light on everything they were pretending not to be. And people deeply committed to their masks panic when someone like you walks in wearing none. You didn't just enter rooms, you shifted the atmosphere. You've always been a walking frequency spike. While others blend in, you disrupt. While others tiptoe around truth, you embody it. While others manipulate the vibe, you become the vibe. That energy is powerful, and not everyone is ready to face themselves in the reflection your presence creates. It's why chosen ones often get labeled weird, too much, or intimidating. Not because they're strange, but because they're unfiltered in a world addicted to filters. Your strength highlights weakness. Your calm highlights their chaos. Your clarity highlights their confusion. They weren't reacting to who you are. They were reacting to the parts of themselves they've been avoiding for years. Chosen one, understand this. Their discomfort was never your burden. It was your confirmation. You were meant to walk into spaces and disrupt the unspoken agreements people made with their own darkness. You were meant to reveal what others refused to see. You were meant to shake the foundation, not tiptoe around it. They tried to silence you, box you in, or shape you into something less threatening, but it didn't work. It couldn't. You're built to disturb stagnation. You're crafted to awaken rooms, not shrink into them. Your presence alone activates truth, and truth is uncomfortable for anyone who isn't ready to face it. So when they called you weird, chosen one, what they really meant was, I don't know how to hide from myself when you're around. Their reactions weren't personal. They were proof. Proof that you were exactly where you were meant to be, right in the center of the places your presence was designed to disrupt. Number 10. You never fit in because you were built to recalibrate the environment, not absorb it. You never fit in because you were built to shift the whole game, not play by its rules. A chosen one doesn't break the system by accident. The system cracks because it was never strong enough to contain them. My dear chosen ones, let's tell the truth that the world tried to make you forget. You didn't struggle to fit in because something was wrong with you. You struggled because you were the glitch in a matrix built for smaller minds and quieter spirits. From day one, your energy disrupted patterns. Your presence exposed what others tried to hide. Your very existence challenged the outdated rules everyone else followed without question. And trust me, systems don't appreciate someone who can see their cracks. While others were chasing acceptance, you were busy sensing misalignment. You could walk into a room and instantly feel whether it matched your path or not. You've always been that puzzle piece with sharper edges, refusing to be shaved down just to blend in. And people didn't understand it. They mistook your difference for difficulty, your uniqueness for defiance. But chosen ones, you weren't born to be absorbed. You were born to restructure. That uneasy feeling you carried throughout your life, that strange sense of, I don't belong here. That wasn't insecurity. That was your internal system detecting environments that could not handle your frequency. You weren't meant to melt into the background. You were meant to shift the atmosphere. And yes, chosen ones, this made people uncomfortable. You've probably wondered, why do people react to me so strongly? Why do some feel intimidated before I even speak? Why do others try to box me in, control me, or silence me? Here's why: your energy naturally disrupts complacency. You carry awareness that exposes illusion. You question what others accept. You see through narratives that everyone else blindly repeats. That alone makes you a threat. You weren't built to accept half-truths just because they're convenient. You weren't built to nod along when something feels off. And you definitely weren't built to shrink just so the room doesn't have to expand. Everything about you, from your intuition to your resilience, was crafted to challenge systems that survive on conformity. Chosen ones, you carry codes within you. Not mystical in the supernatural sense. Codes meaning a deeper intelligence, a sharper perception, a level of clarity that cracks open confusion like light breaking through a closed window. These codes expose the illusions that keep people stagnant. And that's why the world tried to convince you that your difference was a problem. If you ever embraced your full identity, the systems that rely on your silence would collapse. But here's the truth they never wanted you to realize. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to make space where none existed. You were meant to redesign what everyone else accepted as unchangeable. You were meant to ask the questions that shake foundations, to ignite the conversations others are afraid to start. You are a reset button disguised as a human being. So the next time you feel like the odd one out, remind yourself, that feeling is proof of your assignment. You don't belong to the old environment because you're wired for the next era. You're not here to blend. You're here to break through, break open, and break cycles. Chosen ones, you were never the misfit, you were always the blueprint. Number 11. You didn't just heal, you underwent a full internal reconstruction with no numbing. You didn't just heal, you were rebuilt like a warrior, forged without numbing or noise. When a chosen one heals, the enemy doesn't fear the process, they fear the version of you that survives it. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about the part of your journey most people could never survive, let alone understand. They see the strength you carry now, the calm in your eyes, the power in your posture, and they assume your healing was soft, gradual, maybe even comforting. But you and I both know that nothing about your healing was gentle. You didn't patch yourself up in a quiet little corner with warm blankets and easy answers. You underwent a full reconstruction with no anesthesia, no shortcuts, and no place to run from the truth. Chosen ones, while others were healing through surface-level solutions, you were being cracked open from the inside out. Your transformation wasn't a journey, it was an operation, one that sliced into every wound you tried to bury, every trauma you tried to minimize, every belief you inherited that no longer matched your new frequency. There were moments you felt like your entire identity was dissolving, and in a way, it was. Because the version of you that existed before this transformation couldn't carry the weight of the person you were becoming. You weren't healing, you were being rewritten. Every painful realization, every lonely night, every tear you swallowed was part of a deeper recalibration. You were being stripped of old programming, outdated survival tactics, and emotional reflexes that once kept you safe, but now kept you small. And let's be honest, chosen one, healing didn't feel like healing. It felt like being torn apart so you could be pieced back together with newer, stronger, more aligned components. It was intense, raw, and unfiltered. It demanded your honesty. It demanded your surrender. It demanded your evolution. And the reason it hurt so much? Because you were upgrading beyond anything familiar. That's why people from your past don't recognize you anymore. They keep trying to interact with the old version of you, the one who tolerated, shrank, apologized, or accepted less. But that version is gone, dead, replaced by someone whose energy no longer bends to old environments, someone whose growth has made previous connections feel foreign, someone who vibrates on a frequency so elevated, anyone not willing to grow gets left behind by default. Chosen ones, your healing didn't create a better you. It created a completely different you. Your mindset changed, your boundaries sharpened, your intuition expanded, your presence carries a weight it never carried before. And of course, people don't understand it. They only witnessed your breaking, not the reconstruction that followed in silence. They saw the collapse, but not the rebuilding. They saw the tears, but not the transformation. But hear me clearly, that silence you held during your most painful phases wasn't weakness. It was your sanctuary. It was the operating room where your soul was reforged into something the old world wasn't prepared to meet. Chosen ones, you didn't just heal. You evolved. You ascended. You stepped into a version of yourself that ordinary people can't decode and old environments can't contain. And that, right there, is why you move like someone backed by something powerful, precise, and undeniable. Send the next one when you're ready, and chosen ones. As we reach the end of this breakdown, let this truth settle into your spirit. You didn't move the way you moved by accident. You moved like someone backed by a force that refuses to let you collapse. Everything you overcame, everything you sensed, everything you rose from, it was all proof of the power you carry. If this message hit you where you needed it, show your presence. Like this video, hit subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments so I know you're one of the real ones walking this path. And don't forget to share. Another chosen one needs this.